So there I was, surrounded by a bunch of slimy tentacled freaks who thought they were the hottest shit in the galaxy. Dave recounted, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he took a swig from his beer. The dingy bar around him was filled with an assortment of humans and aliens, all eagerly hanging on to his every word. And let me tell you, these aliens had egos bigger than their oversized heads. A chorus of laughter erupted from the crowd, punctuated by the clink of glasses and the occasional burp. Dave grinned, basking in the attention. It wasn't every day that a human got to be the center of attention in an intergalactic watering hole. "Go on, Dave," shouted a green-skinned Zorgan from the back. "Tell us how you showed those stuck-up Sarlaxians what humans are made of." Dave leaned back in his chair, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Oh, I'll tell you all right, but first, let me paint you a picture of just how ridiculous these Sarlaxians looked. Imagine a cross between a jellyfish and a peacock, but with the personality of a DMV employee on a bad day." More laughter filled the air, along with a few confused looks from the aliens who had no idea what a DMV was. Dave didn't bother explaining. Some Earth references were just too good to pass up, even if half his audience didn't get them. So there I was, fresh off my rickety old ship, stepping onto the pristine floors of the Galactic Council's headquarters. And let me tell you, those floors were so shiny I could see my own reflection, which, by the way, looked a hell of a lot better than the funhouse mirror monstrosity staring back at me. Dave paused for effect, taking another sip of his beer. The crowd leaned in, eager for more. "Now I know what you're thinking. Dave, you handsome devil, why were you even there?" Well, let me tell you, it wasn't by choice. Apparently, when you accidentally blow up a small moon while trying to parallel park your spaceship, the Galactic Council tends to take notice. A ripple of knowing chuckles spread through the bar. Who among them hadn't had a little fender bender in space? So there I was, standing before the Sarlaxian High Council, trying to explain that the moon had it coming. I mean, who puts a moon that close to a space station anyway? It's just asking for trouble. Dave's animated gestures nearly knocked over his beer, but he caught it just in time. A nearby Fluberian, whose body was essentially a sentient puddle, flinched at the near spill. But these Sarlaxians, oh boy, they weren't having any of it. They looked down at me from their floating podiums, because apparently chairs are too mainstream for these pompous pricks, and started going on and on about human inferiority. Dave's voice took on a mocking, high-pitched tone as he imitated the Sarlaxians. "Oh, look at the puny human with his fragile bones and laughable lifespan. How did such a primitive species even make it off their pathetic little rock?" The bar erupted in boos and jeers, with several patrons shouting obscenities about the Sarlaxians that would make a sailor blush. "I know, right?" Dave nodded vigorously. "But wait, it gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. These glorified calamari rings had the audacity to suggest that humans should be confined to Earth for their own safety. Can you believe that crap?" A collective gasp of indignation rose from the crowd. Even the non-human patrons looked offended on behalf of their human drinking buddies. "Now I'm not one to lose my cool easily," Dave continued, ignoring the snort of disbelief from a regular who had seen him start a bar fight over a game of darts last week. But this was too much. I stood there, listening to these bloated balloons of pretentiousness drone on about how humans were a danger to themselves and others, how we lacked the mental capacity to grasp the complexities of intergalactic society. Dave's face twisted into a grimace of disgust, and then, to add insult to injury, they had the gall to pat me on the head. Like I was some sort of pet. Can you imagine? These noodle-armed jellies patting me on the head? The bar crowd was now fully invested in the story, their drinks forgotten as they hung on Dave's every word. Even the bartender, a stoic Andromedian with 4 arms and a face like a granite cliff, had stopped polishing glasses to listen. "So what did you do, Dave?" called out a voice from the crowd. "Did you show M what humans are made of?" Dave's grin widened, turning almost predatory. "Oh, I showed them all right, but not right away. See, that's the thing about us humans. We're patient. We can play the long game when we need to." He leaned forward conspiratorially, and the entire bar seemed to lean with him. I smiled at those condescending calamari. I nodded politely. I even thanked them for their concern about the well-being of humanity. And then I left. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the explosive confrontation they had been expecting. I know. Dave held up his hands placatingly. "Not very exciting, right? But trust me, the best was yet to come." See, while those floating fools were busy patting themselves on the back for putting the puny human in his place, I was making plans. Big plans. Dave's eyes sparkled with mischief and something else, a hint of the steel that lay beneath his jovial exterior. It was a reminder to everyone present that humans hadn't spread across the stars by being pushovers. I went back to Earth, and let me tell you, I was on a mission. I gathered the brightest minds, the toughest soldiers, the most cunning strategists. It's like we formed a team. No, scratch that. We formed a pack. A pack of humans ready to show the galaxy what we're really made of. The atmosphere in the bar had shifted. The laughter had died down, replaced by an anticipatory silence. Even the ambient noise of the space station outside seemed to have faded away. For 2 years, we prepared. We studied every species in the Galactic Council, learning their strengths, their weaknesses, their deepest dares. So we developed technologies that would make those Galaxian eggheads wet themselves if they even had the capacity for that bodily function. Dave's voice had lost its sarcastic edge, taking on a tone of fierce pride. We created ships that could outmaneuver anything in the galaxy, weapons that could pierce the toughest armor, shields that could withstand the heat of a dying star. But most importantly, we owned our greatest weapon, the human spirit. A cheer went up from the human patrons, echoed somewhat confusedly by their alien friends who weren't quite sure what was going on but were caught up in the moment nonetheless. And then, exactly 2 years to the day after I left that council chamber, we returned. Oh, you should have seen the looks on their faces, or whatever passes for faces on those gelatinous blobs. There we were, a fleet of ships that put their precious armada to shame, led by yours truly. Dave stood up, caught up in the memory. His beer sloshed dangerously, but he paid it no mind. I strode into that council chamber like I owned the place. And let me tell you, the silence was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop, if pins were a thing in space. Barr hung on his every word, completely enthralled. I walked right up to that same Sarlaxian who had patted me on the head. He was hovering there, all smug and superior, probably thinking I was back to grovel or something. And you know what I did? Dave paused, milking the moment for all it was worth. The tension in the bar was palpable. I patted him on his squishy excuse for a head and said, there, little fella. The adults are here now. Why don't you run along and play with your shiny toys while we take care of the real business? The bar exploded into raucous laughter and cheers. Drinks were spilled, backs were slapped, and more than a few aliens found themselves wondering if they should be worried about their human friends. Oh, but it gets better, Dave continued, raising his voice to be heard over the commotion. You see, we didn't just show up to flex our muscles. No, we came with solutions. Real solutions to the problems plaguing the galaxy. Problems that these so-called superior species had been twiddling their tentacles over for centuries. He began ticking off points on his fingers. Energy crisis, solved it. Interspecies conflicts, mediated them. Faster than light travel, perfected it. And don't even get me started on the improvements we made to the galactic internet. Let's just say that buffering is now a thing of the past, and you can thank humanity for that. The alien patrons in the bar looked at each other in amazement. They had all experienced the frustration of trying to stream the latest episode of The Real Housewives of Betelgeuse only to be met with that infuriating spinning circle. But here's the kicker. Dave's voice dropped to a near whisper, forcing everyone to lean in closer. We did it all without firing a single shot, without subjugating a single species, without demanding anything in return. We just helped. A confused murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't how conquering usually worked in the galaxy. You see, Dave explained, his tone serious for the first time since he began his tale. That's the thing about humans that these Sarlaxians and their ilk could never understand. We're not driven by a need to dominate or to prove our superiority. We're driven by curiosity, by a desire to explore, to improve, to connect. He looked around the bar, making eye contact with humans and aliens alike. Sure, we've got our flaws. We can be reckless, impulsive, sometimes downright stupid. But we learn from our mistakes. We adapt, we grow, and most importantly, we don't give up. Dave raised his glass high. So here's to humanity, to the species that was laughed at, underestimated, and written off, and responded by making the entire galaxy a better place. The bar erupted into cheers once more, glasses clinking as humans and aliens toasted together. The story of humanity's triumphant return had struck a chord with every Drzant. As the noise died down, a young Arcturian in the corner raised a tentacle. But Dave, it asked in a high-pitched voice, what happened next? Did the Sarlaxians apologize? Did humans take over the Galactic Council? Dave chuckled, shaking his head. Now that, my curious friend, is a whole other story. One that involves a galactic dance-off, a misunderstanding about Earth's nuclear family concept, and the strangest game of interspecies charades you've ever seen. But I think I've talked enough for one night. A chorus of protests rose from the crowd, but Dave held up his hands. Now, don't worry. I'll be back tomorrow night with more tales of human awesomeness. After all, Someone's got to keep you all entertained while educating you on the greatness that is humanity. As Dave settled back into his seat, basking in the admiration of his interstellar audience, he couldn't help but smile to himself. Sure, maybe he had embellished a few details here and there. Maybe the reality of humanity's rise in the galactic community had been a bit less dramatic and a lot more bureaucratic. But the essence of the story was true. Humans had indeed gone from being the laughingstock of the galaxy to one of its most respected species. They had done it not through force or intimidation, but through innovation, cooperation, and an unbreakable spirit that even the most advanced alien races had come to admire. Dave took another sip of his beer, watching as the bar patrons broke into animated discussions about his story. Humans and aliens alike were debating the finer points, sharing their own experiences, and generally marveling at the unexpected twists and turns of galactic politics. The grizzled Toraxian space trucker leaned over to Dave. He growled in a voice like gravel in a blender. I was there when the humans first joined the Galactic Council. Didn't think much of them at the time. Figured they'd be just another footnote in the grand history of space. But I'll be damned if you lot didn't prove me wrong. Dave grinned. That's what we do best, my friend. Proving people wrong, one impossible feat at a time. The Toraxian nodded sagely. You humans have a saying, don't you? Something about reaching for the stars. Shoot for the moon, Dave corrected. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. The alien's compound eyes blinked in confusion. But the moon is much closer than the stars. But wouldn't it make more sense to? Dave cut him off with a laugh. Don't overthink it, buddy. It's just a metaphor. The point is, we humans dream big. And sometimes those dreams take us further than we ever imagined. As the night wore on, Dave found himself regaling the bar with more tales of human ingenuity and bravery. He told them about the first human to successfully navigate the treacherous void of Zanzibar, a feat previously thought impossible. He recounted the story of Dr. Emily Chen, whose groundbreaking research had led to a cure for the Rigelian plague, saving billions of lives across the galaxy. With each story, the aliens in the bar grew more and more impressed. They had all heard of these events. Of course, they were galactic history by now. But hearing them from a human perspective, understanding the emotions and motivations behind these incredible achievements, gave them a new appreciation for their human neighbors. As the bar began to empty out, a young human woman approached Dave. Her eyes were shining with a mixture of admiration and determination. "Mr. Dave," she said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement, "I'm shipping out tomorrow on my first deep space mission. After hearing your stories, I'm not sure I'm cut out for this. How do you do it? How do you face the unknown with such confidence?" Dave's expression softened. He recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same one he'd had all those years ago when he first set foot on an alien world. "Listen, kid," he said gently, "the secret isn't being fearless. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. That's what makes us human. We see the impossible, and instead of turning away, we say challenge accepted." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Out there, you're going to see things that will take your breath away. You'll face challenges that seem insurmountable, but remember this, you're a human. You come from a long line of explorers, innovators, and dreamers. No matter what the universe throws at you, you've got millions of years of evolution and millennia of human history backing you up." The young woman stood a little straighter, her chin lifting with newfound confidence. "Thank you, Mr. Dave. I think I'm ready now." As she walked away, head held high, Dave felt a surge of pride. This, he realized, was the real reason he told these stories. Not for the glory or the free drinks, but to inspire the next generation of human explorers, to remind them of the incredible legacy they were a part of, and the boundless potential that lay within each of them. The bartender, who had been silently observing all night, finally spoke up. "You know, Dave," the Andromedian said in a voice like silk over steel, "I've been serving drinks in this bar for over 200 Earth years. I've seen species rise and fall, empires crumble, and stars go nova. But I've never seen anything quite like you humans." Dave raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment or an insult?" The bartender's granite face cracked into what might have been a smile. "Neither, both. It's an observation. You humans are unpredictable, chaotic. You break all the rules of how a young species should behave, and yet somehow you make it work. You turn your weaknesses into strengths, your failures into stepping stones. It's fascinating." Dave chuckled. "Well, what can I say? We're an acquired taste, but once you get used to us, we tend to grow on you." The bartender's crystalline eyes glimmered with what might have been amusement. "Like a fungus, perhaps." "Hey now," Dave protested good-naturedly, "I prefer to think of us as a fine wine. We only get better with age." As the last few patrons filtered out of the bar, Dave found himself alone with the Andromedian bartender. The silence that fell between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that comes from years of late-night conversations and shared secrets. "You know," the bartender said after a while, his voice thoughtful, "I've always wondered something about you humans. You talk a big game about unity and cooperation, but your history is full of conflict and division. How do you reconcile that?" Dave leaned back in his chair, considering the question. It was a fair one, and not one he could answer with his usual bravado and charm. "Guess," he said slowly, "it's because we're not perfect. We're messy, complicated, and yeah, sometimes we fight among ourselves. But that's also what makes us strong." The bartender tilted his head, a gesture that indicated curiosity in his species. Dave continued, warming to his theme. "See, every conflict we've had, every war we've fought, every division we've overcome, they've all taught us something. We learn from our mistakes, we grow. And when we face a challenge bigger than our internal squabbles, we come together. It's like we needed to fight among ourselves first to learn how to fight for each other." The Andromedian nodded slowly, processing this. An interesting perspective. But surely, a species without internal conflict would be more efficient, more united in the face of external threats. Dave laughed, a sound that echoed in the empty bar. More efficient, maybe, but also boring as hell. Our conflicts are disagreements, they drive us forward. They force us to innovate, to find new solutions, to be better than we were yesterday. A species without conflict is a species without growth. He leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with intensity. "You want to know the real secret to humanity's success? It's not our technology, or our bravery, or even our adaptability. It's our diversity. We're pieces of individuals, each with our own thoughts, dreams, and ideas. And when we bring all of that together, when we harness the power of millions of unique perspectives, that's when we're truly unstoppable." The bartender was silent for a long moment, his crystalline form shimmering slightly in the dim light of the bar. Finally, he spoke. "You know, Dave, I think I'm beginning to understand why the Serlaxians found you so unsettling. You humans don't just think outside the box. You take the box, reshape it, turn it inside out, and then use it to build something entirely new." Dave grinned. "That's us, cosmic box breakers, at your service." As the first hints of the artificial dawn began to creep through the bar's windows, Dave stood up, stretching his arms above his head. "Well, my crystalline friend, it's been a pleasure as always. But I've got a busy day ahead of me. Galaxies to save, aliens to befriend, you know how it is." The bartender's form rippled in what Dave had come to recognize as laughter. "Of course. Will you be gracing us with your presence again tomorrow night?" Dave winked. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, or should I say for the universe." As he made his way to the door, Dave paused, turning back to the bartender. "You know, I've been coming here for years, telling my stories, and I just realized I don't know your name." The Andromedian's crystalline form shimmered in surprise. I don't have one. My species doesn't use individual designations." Dave frowned. "Well, that won't do. Everyone should have a name. How about Cliff? You know, because your face looks like a lie." "A granite cliff." "Yes, I remember your description from earlier," the bartender finished, his tone dry but not displeased. "Cliff. I like it. It's very human." Dave beamed. "Cliff it is then. See you tomorrow night, Cliff." As the door slid shut behind Dave, Cliff the Andromedian bartender found himself pondering the strange, wonderful enigma that was humanity. In all his centuries of existence, he had never encountered a species quite like them. Brash yet compassionate, reckless yet ingenious, divided yet united, they were a walking contradiction. A cosmic joke that somehow worked. And as he began to prepare the bar for another day of serving the galaxy's misfits and adventurers, Cliff realized something that made his crystalline form vibrate with quiet laughter. Altair, he, an ancient being who had prided himself on his detachment from the younger races, had just been given a name by a human. And strangest of all, he liked it. Outside the bar, Dave made his way through the bustling spaceport, nodding greetings to the diverse array of beings going about their daily lives. Humans mingled freely with aliens of all shapes and sizes, their interactions a testament to how far they had come since those early, awkward days of first contact. As he walked, Dave couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought humanity to this point. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, misunderstandings, and yes, even conflicts. But through it all, humans had persevered, driven by that inexhaustible curiosity and determination that seemed to be hardwired into their very DNA. He remembered the first human colony on Mars, the challenges they had faced and overcome. He thought about the breakthrough in faster-than-light travel that had opened up the galaxy to human exploration, and he smiled as he recalled the look of utter bewilderment on the face of the Zorgan ambassador when a human delegation had greeted him with a barbecue and a game of frisbee. Lost in his thoughts, Dave almost didn't notice the young Sarlaxian approaching him until they were face to, well, not face, but close enough. "Excuse me," the Sarlaxian said, its voice a musical trill that seemed at odds with its jellyfish-like appearance. "You're David Chen, aren't you? The human who changed everything." Dave blinked in surprise. It wasn't often that a Sarlaxian approached a human voluntarily, let alone with such reverence in their voice. "That's me," he said cautiously, "though I think changed everything might be overstating it a bit. Brickus did what any human would do in my position." The Sarlaxian's tendrils quivered in what Dave had learned to recognize as excitement. "But that's just it. That's what makes all humans so remarkable. You say any human would do it as if it's nothing special, but to the rest of us, it's revolutionary." Dave felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the 3 beers he'd consumed earlier. "Well, when you put it like that, I guess we are pretty awesome, aren't we?" The young Sarlaxian bobbed in agreement. "I'm studying human history at the Galactic University," it explained. "The more I learn, the more amazed I am. Your species faced extinction-level events multiple times, and each time you not only survived but came back stronger. You've turned some of your greatest weaknesses into your greatest strengths. It's inspiring." Dave grinned, feeling a surge of pride not just in himself, but in all of humanity. "Well, kid, if you want to learn more about humans, I've got some stories that would curl your tendrils. Why don't you come by the bar tonight? First round's on me." As the excited young Sarlaxian floated away, promising to bring all its friends to hear Dave's stories, Dave couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. From being laughed at and dismissed to being studied and admired, it was a hell of a journey. He thought about the young human woman shipping out on her first deep space mission, carrying with her the hopes and dreams of her species. He thought about Cliff the bartender, who had seen the rise and fall of empires, but still found humans fascinating. And he thought about this young Sarlaxian, eager to learn more about the species that had once been considered too primitive to join the galactic community. As he reached his ship, Dave paused, looking up at the star-filled sky visible through the spaceport's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, human ships were exploring uncharted sectors of space. Human scientists were unraveling the mysteries of the universe, and human diplomats were forging new alliances with alien races. And here he was, Dave Chen, once the laughingstock of the Galactic Council, now a living legend, a symbol of humanity's indomitable spirit and their journey from underdogs to alphas of the galaxy. He chuckled to himself as he climbed into his ship. Who would have thought that accidentally blowing up a moon would lead to all this? But then again, that was the human way, wasn't it? Taking mistakes and turning them into opportunities, facing adversity with a grin and a bad joke, and somehow, against all odds, coming out on top. As his ship lifted off, joining the stream of traffic heading out into the vastness of space, Dave felt a sense of excitement building in his chest. There were still so many adventures to be had, so many stories to be told, and he, like all humans, was ready to face whatever the universe had in store for them next. After all, they were humans. They had already proved the impossible possible once. Who knew what they might achieve next? As Dave's ship disappeared into the starry expanse, the legend of the humans, the species that laughed in the face of impossibility and danced on the edge of the unknown, continued to grow. And across the galaxy, beings of all kinds looked to the stars with a mixture of awe and anticipation, wondering what these remarkable, unpredictable, utterly human humans would do next. The universe, it seemed, was holding its breath, and humanity, well, they were just getting started.